Hey guys, it's BlockchainBrad, and today we're talking about Traceto.io, and it's a very exciting and innovative KYC based and also AI based compliance framework and blockchain project. To explain this further, we have the CEO, and his name is Chye Kit. Chye, thank you very much for being on the channel today.
Thanks for having me, Brad.
No problem at all.
Pleasure.
So Trace2.io, a very exciting project, but obviously as a CEO, you've done some amazing things. I've written down a few of them, so please bear with me while I do explain some of your background, Chye, and then we can hear it from you. But you are currently the co-founder and manager of Synopsis Solutions. You're the director of that company. We're going to find out
Yes.
why that's so important. You are also obviously the CEO of this one, and we're going to explore what Trace2.io is. But what I was impressed by is that you have 20 years of experience in the financial marketplace, particularly with regard to commercial market experience in Asia, and you've achieved your credentials or your studies from a very prominent university in Singapore, the Nanyang Technological University, where you received your degree in accountancy. So you're well experienced, you're well situated for this role, but tell us, from your own lips, from your own experience, why are you, well situated to lead this as a CEO?
Thanks for the very brief and very complete introduction, Brett. Now, I think for me, with my background, with a long standing in financial services sector, but not just that area, but I'm actually niche into the compliance and regulatory space, which is actually quite important to the domain area that we're in, KYC.
Right.
So that makes I think our project very, very unique to begin with, because we've got the right domain expertise to try and solve a problem, rather than to say let's use technology to solve a problem without actually understanding how this problem is being dealt with in a real situation, like in the banks and the financial services sector. So that's definitely different.
Right. And I see, sorry to interrupt, but I see that you are moving in the direction of the next question anyway, Chye. So let's do that with regard to really exploring these problems that you clearly foresaw. We know you're experienced in what you do. You have the credentials. So let's get to the point. What are these problems specifically that you needed to address and you felt were relevant right now to fix?
Okay. My experience had come from the banking and the financial services sector, and that sector have been struggling for the last 10, 20 years with AML, KYC issues and fines and sanctions or censures by the regulators around the world. Right? So that's what they have been going through. Now, when I look at the cryptocurrency clients or the blockchain client startups that I have, including fintechs and the smaller players out there, they struggle even more because they don't have a lot of things. They usually don't have a lot of budget, to look at compliance. They don't have the knowledge. They don't have the resources to deal with compliance or deal with AML, KYC onboarding matters. So that itself is a big problem to have within the ecosystem, because with all the regulatory scrutiny that has been placed on this cryptocurrency sector, now without a robust KYC platform or utility to level up the regulatory standard, you're going to end up with a situation whereby the level of adoption, level of assurance, and the level of comfort from the community, from the regulator, is not going to be there. Right. So my vision for Trace2.io is actually to promote regulatory inclusion, which is basically, once you level up the regulatory standard of this sector, you will lead to greater adoption, and therefore you can actually solve the problem.
Right. Well, clearly you're a proponent of the RegTech, and you are an expert in compliance itself with, a background in finance particularly. Your accountancy, experience is going to be fundamental to really rolling this out. And as you mentioned, the ICO itself, the sheer design for mechanisms to become prominent startups is really what sets this apart as well. But let's explore this a little bit further. You mentioned the term KYC. Now, we both know what that is, but many people may not. So let's go from the basics. What is it, and why is it relevant to Trace2.io?
Okay, so KYC, as commonly known in the banking sector or in finance sector, is know your customer. So basically, KYC is a process involve a process and a set of procedures where you demonstrate to regulators or law enforcers that you have done your due diligence on the customers that you bring on, as well as throughout the relationship that you have with that customers, and that you know the customers in terms of their profiles, in terms of who they are, in terms of them not being the bad guys, and in terms of their transactions patterns and behaviors.
Okay, so that's
the
quite
definition
clear.
of KYC.
Well, thank you.
Now,
so how does that relate specifically with you,
sure.
and what are you doing that really is in a nutshell with Trace2.io?
Okay, so the key thing, or the extension from the KYC definition I just described, is underpins the area of anti-money laundering and counter-terrorism financing, because this is one big area of regulatory obligation that sits with all of us. You know, whether you are operating a bank or whether you're operating a small financial services setup or crypto startup. So the obligation to deal with anti-money laundering, or make sure that you do not have money laundering or terrorism financing activities going through your platform or going through your business. This is this then supports the process of your KYC obligations.
I see, and clearly there'd be some legal implications or a needs analysis from government sector and enterprise sectors. And from your experience, have you found that generally this kind of thinking is supported from the top down in nations around the world?
So, certainly, Brad, because I think if we look at KYC, AML, or CTF in general, globally, I'm not talking about any specific countries in Asia or in US or in Europe, because the fundamental principles of AML KYC starts from this global body called Financial Action Task Force, FATF in short. So that sets out the global standards, sets out 40 recommendations for all the countries in the world to comply or to set their laws and set their requirements out locally. And most of these regulations or legislations around the world on AML KYC are fairly similar, because they have to conform to the Financial Action Task Force standards. So with that, and also I will extend that for the cryptocurrency space, FATF has actually done quite a lot of work in recent years, and they've actually published a lot of guidances on virtual currencies and their implications on AML and CTF as well, and the potential abuse of this sector for the purpose of proliferating money laundering and terrorism financing. So a lot of work has been done in that space, and therefore I see this as a preemptive move or future proving of the industry of what I'm trying to do, to make sure that, you know, without you don't do this KYC only when someone pushes you to do, because by then you're almost going to be like what happens to a lot of financial companies or banks, you know, in the last 30 years, where they only move when they are hit with a regulatory fine. So that makes it, and the cost of remediation and the cost of putting things right is going to be very, very costly for everybody. So a very simple example is that if you look at the amount of money that's been spent by global banks over the last several years since the financial crisis, cumulatively it's been estimated about $321 billion been spent. So then you compare, sort of draw a comparison to the overall market cap of the crypto space. You know, it was it's about 400 plus billion now, and last month it's probably about 300 plus billion.
So it's growing.
Like, yeah, exactly. So that comparison is almost like this is the entire market cap of the cryptocurrency possibilities and for the future. And then there you have, in the last 10 years, the global financial services sector has actually spent 321 billion. I don't think that is the kind of money that the crypto participants want to spend. And this is not saying anything bad about the banking sector. It's just that that's what it is. It is what it is for the last 10 years. But the cryptocurrency space certainly have an opportunity to get this right without actually having to spend those money.
I see. So essentially, the key word from that response was preemptive. What you're essentially trying to set up is being that first mover in this space, or one of the very first, to have this optimized position as we move into these enterprises as well that are going to require KYC applications to be to conform to regulations. So again,
correct, because it's going to happen anyway. So rather than to try to find ways to dodge it, or to say that because blockchain is completely anonymous or pseudo anonymous, and therefore AML is irrelevant, I think that will not get the sector very far.
Sure.
Then you're going to end up with regulators scrutinizing it even further, and no one's going to be in a better position.
No question of that. And obviously with your experience as a CEO, you would talk to many other CEOs, and I certainly had that privilege. Have you also had that kind of feedback from mainstream CEOs in mainstream businesses when they're looking towards blockchain? Clearly they're pro KYC.
When you say mainstream CEO, you're talking about people in the financial services sector, yeah?
Sure. Not the the ones who aren't yet
the non-crypto.
Right.
Yeah, I think the ones I'm just looking at the client base that I have, because at Synopsys, I think this is probably a bit of a lead on to the next questions as well. But anyway, for Synopsys as a software provider to about 600 B2B clients, which a large percentage of them are actually crypto ones. But we do have a long list of clients who are in the who are insurers, financial advisors, fund managers, remittance companies, as well as non-financial services companies like the accountants, lawyers, and the corporate services providers. Yeah. So in my conversation with most of these people, they struggle with a few things. Number one, as a CEO of a business, your main driver or motivation is to basically move forward with growing revenue, growing client base, and so on and so forth. But with AML KYC obligation, a lot of time it becomes a showstopper, right? Oh, you have to do this check, you have to do that check before you take on the customer. Things move a lot slower. Mm-hmm. So when we come into the market, we provide automations and digitization that a lot of these people are struggle with paper documentation. Right. This analog version, which is actually where a lot of people are at, and it's actually probably no secret to say that a lot of the incumbent banks and large financial institutions are also very, very paper driven. So when we come in and help them with the digitization and automation of the process, not even talking about tokenization and blockchains as well, it's just talking about basic level 1 automation and digitization, that actually helps them a great deal. Now then, a level of adoption of technology can be that, okay, this is a great piece of technology, just use it, and then no question about it. It's not gonna sell, right? Because people is gonna have questions about various things, security, what else can I do with it? Who else have access to that, and so on and so forth. So it's a strings of questions that is in people's mind. And then one of the other fundamental questions is that if I've been doing KYC AML in this particular way, why is it that this new way is going to be better? And is the regulator going to have issue with that? So that's one of those fundamental questions, which...
Absolutely, and a perfect segue. So let's go there with that, because I wanted to ask you what sets you apart, but I just wanted to sort of reaffirm basically the context of what you're saying is that you're addressing what the incumbents are not, in that, yes, there are elements in the, the more mainstream centralized sectors of business that are doing certain things for verification, but certainly not in the decentralized space, and you're bringing that to the fore and providing, most importantly, a one-stop shop to make it easy for compliance measures to be afforded by enterprise and for those who wish to do it easily. So we understand that. So let's talk about now the distinguished features, in the sense that clearly you were alluding to KYC being a mechanism for some companies now, but there are aspects of you that set you apart from even those that are up and coming, which we'll discuss later as competitors, as you mentioned, or potentially other existing companies. But what are the features of Traceto.io that are just essentially standout features?
Okay, the first thing is that we as you mentioned earlier on, a lot of KYC has always been on a centralized fashion, and everybody have to keep doing it on their own. Now, one key feature is that we are going to be a utility platform, right? And which means that from a end user perspective, like you and I, you don't want to be KYC like 20 times all over by participating in 20 projects or opening accounts with 10 exchanges or wallets, right? So this utility platform, and with pre-existing early adopters that we already have, the likes of Kyber, the likes of GBX, the likes of DGX, and a number of others that we've put out announcements on or media posts on, these prove that this ecosystem is actually much needed because there isn't such an ecosystem today. You know, there are players out there who does identity management, and I see identity management as one aspect of KYC. So, and it doesn't. I don't even see them as competitors in the sense, not because of anything. It's because that potentially, if their identity management module is so good that is useful, then we don't want to reinvent wheels.
Right.
Essentially, we want to be able to plug anybody into this ecosystem because it's a community, right?
But as
now,
you said, that's one facet of your ecosystem or your design, your architecture.
Yes.
So let's talk about that in terms of these core facets that are your assets.
Yes. So okay. So I think the first thing is that the ecosystem itself is fundamentally important. And then when we when we look at our project, we distill the framework into 4 different questions that we want to answer. And actually, if you think about it that way, then you kind of understand what problem exists for each of these questions and how do you put solutions into them. Otherwise, you're just gonna be all over the place, right? So let me just explain our KYC framework to you first, right? So we try and distill, because with our experience, we distill KYC or AML, CTF into 4 different questions, and that's also written up in a white paper. So the first being who you are, right, or who are you? So it's like if you want to, and identity management is part of it. So we can look at who are you as in, okay, you say that you're Brad, I say I'm a Chye Kit, then they prove that you are who you are, right? Rather than to try and reinvent the concept of identity to say that let's just create an e-identity for every single body to say that, you know, I'm almost becoming like an issuer of identity. I'd rather not do that, because identity is a construct of individual countries or jurisdictions legislation on the ability for the government to issue passports, driver's license, or national ID, right? So we want to use things that has already been issued around the world. Now, that's if that's been if that's the document that prove who you are, so be it. We use that and you know, do some verification with it. So you say you are Brad, so you prove that you're Brad, and that's one question to answer. And of course, where the technology comes in, you know, we were going to use things like artificial intelligence and machine learning, you know, on facial recognition, video recognition, text recognition, OCRs, even as well as potentially contextualization of documents, right? So if the incumbents of banks, let's say for example, if they're collecting things like utility bill, for example, right? So contextualizing utility bill and attesting that would actually be one of the things that we could do. You know, we can't do all the things together at one time, but the project will obviously take some time to get into a few stages. But by and large, if you compare to what incumbents are doing, a lot of these verifications are even done manually. Right.
So you're really the key point you're making is that you're converting that manual, you know, process into an automated process. That's what is the beauty of blockchain. It does that automatically. But you are also going from step by step. You're doing identity. I like that you are not reinventing the wheel or challenging nations. That's really important for adoption. You're actually inclusive of these nations' unique processes, and also you're doing something unique by bringing AI in, and these attestations as well are also being brought in as well.
And then the second question that it needs to be answered, which is actually who you are not. So typically in the banks, we call that like the screening of politically exposed persons, sanctions, and adverse media, right? So we then work with established database companies or media company to basically power this search process. And of course, we'll actually do some crawling of the webs as well to make sure that it's a little bit more complete. And that is actually one essential part that a lot of regulators around the world is an industry standard. It can't just do a KYC without saying that you've checked that these guys is not on the sanction list. This is fundamentally basic. So, and this is what back to say synopsis, this is what we actually do for our clients as well. Then the third question is actually also very important. Is okay, fine. You say who you are. You say you're not the bad guy, and that's all fine. It's all checked. But are you still who you say you are? You know, because you know you may not be a terrorist today, and you may be a terrorist tomorrow. You know, I know the percentage of chances of that happening may not be very high, but you know, once that happens, if you do not continuously check that profile reasonably, then you may run the risk of a lot of the people that you have on board becomes potentially bad.
Right.
You know, then what do you do with them?
Sure.
So that's are you still who you say you are? The third question, and the fourth question that we want to answer will be targeted at the continuous, ongoing ecosystem users, like your exchanges, your wallets, as well as certain platforms on P2P providing P2P services. So that will be considered what did you do, right? So you cannot open an account and say, oh, there is money laundering going through or terrorism financing going through without an actual transaction being having occurred. So what did you do? Transaction monitoring. We're going to be able to look at using artificial intelligence, machine learning again for a different thing, to be able to do a little bit of clusterings and predictive analysis on the our clients users or the exchanges users to see whether there is with this series of transactions that has taken place, are there any unusual activities that has occurred that results in potential suspicious transaction reporting obligation.
Sure, and that's surely highly beneficial in terms of ensuring the security of the network, ensuring that it's trustable. And this is the irony again, because you're building out a decentralized model for a trustless system. But fundamentally, your selling point is that you've got a multifaceted aspect of your architecture to ensure that number one is that people can A, know who you are, and B, know that throughout your movements and existence that you are verified as someone who is worthy of being in this ecosystem.
I think one other point that I will highlight is that some people may think that doing KYC to this extent is an overkill, but at the end of the day, this is not overkill. This is actually the basic, and trust me, because FedF, I've been following what FedF has been doing, and there is going to be a lot more. There's been doing a lot of research in the virtual currency space. There's going to be a lot more guidance going to be issued, and with these guidances, each country is going to start developing their own requirements, and it's going to be very, very similar to what has been issued, for the last 20, 30 years. But the one fundamental difference in doing all this as compared to this is not the same as trying to be the policeman or the investigator or trying to be the extension of the police force. Because
I'm glad you raised this.
Doing due diligence for the purpose of fulfilling obligations that you're providing a platform, providing a service that you do not want money laundering activities to be going through your platform or terrorism financing, because these are terrible crimes that hits all of us in one way or another. So, but that's quite distinct from if you're an extension. Traceto is not an extension to a police force. You're not working for the government, but we want to work with the governments or the law enforcer to make sure that our participants in this ecosystem are able to discharge their obligations, regulatory obligations, on to demonstrate that they have done their due diligence on their users and they've adopt the best practice globally.
And Chye Kit, obviously law enforcement agencies would be proponents of this. There is a perfect juxtaposition, to say the least, or a synergy, in that their interests are clearly to ensure that as we move, for example, you're an accountant, taxation's very serious right now now that people are profiting from the blockchain, profiting from cryptocurrency. So quite sincerely, KYC is a very serious top-down consideration. Are you excited about the fact that they are taking this very seriously and demonstrating already that they value KYC and AML?
Well, it's certainly yes, because the focus on regulation it underpins it's the crux of our business. We're in the regulatory space. We're a RegTech outfit. So the more complex the regulation is or the more scrutiny regulatory requirements become, it means that there is a greater need for what we do.
Sure.
And because KYC, AML, CTF is the fundamental regulatory requirement.
Right.
This is not even getting into, like what has been hit with the financial sector for the last 10 years or more than that, on mis-selling, product suitability, best interest of the clients, and so on and so forth, right? That you see all these regulators coming out everywhere in the world to set out additional requirements on mis-selling.
Right.
No disadvantage of the client, but this is fundamentally common area for everybody for AML KYC that we see that as a very, very positive thing because, as I said earlier on, we know what these requirements are and we want to be able to level up the industry or promote regulatory inclusion. So I think we're aligned in terms of the vision that we have with what the regulator wants to do or the law enforcer wants to do. So, but we don't want to work for them.
Right. Well, let's explore this though, because you've mentioned just now that you don't necessarily want to work for them. But I want to unpack that one step further and find out what the potential is for some of these, mutual relationships or more reciprocal relations between entities like government and major enterprise. You as someone situated in Singapore, someone with this experience, you would know already if there is such interest even locally in your region. But is there potential with Trace2.io to specifically work with governments? I ask you this because I have spoken with the Key, with Catherine Lee herself, and she certainly is doing that with the Key. So is it possible that you can collaborate directly?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. So that has always been collaboration. Does not necessarily. So I make a distinction: working for and working with, right? And I think what you're alluding to is actually working with, because working for is quite different. Working for would mean that commercially, I'm deriving revenue from whoever that I work for, whereas working with is different. We work alongside each other. Now, just not just within the local government. I mean, I've also been reaching out to Interpol, for example, the International Police Department. So that's actually like a group of 192 police force around the world. Because that's one interesting thing that we thought will be quite useful for everybody, which is basically I'm not sure whether you heard of this concept, but Interpol actually has got a database of stolen or reported stolen or lost passports, for example, and the number actually currently stands at about like 68 million reported lost passports around the world.
Wow.
So it's a system called iCheckIt. Okay. Now, that's what they do when if you're going to the airport and getting on the plane, the airline industry actually uses that iCheckIt database to basically check whether are you traveling with a stolen passport, which invariably I think will lead to potential risk of security, cross-border risk and security risk, terrorism risk, and all sorts of stuff. So, using that as an example, we're speaking to them as well to say how can the ecosystem, or even not just blockchain, but the financial services sector, for example, can benefit from using accessing this database, because the one key thing, for example, is that people usually use, say, collect a copy of the passports for KYC, right? I mentioned earlier on, but none of us are actually experts in verifying or authenticating passports, whether they are real or they are fake, because we're not the issuing authority.
Right.
So but with 68 million stolen passports out there in the market today, and they're probably not going to be used to travel. They can be used to open bank accounts. They can be used to open crypto exchanges accounts and the like. So we want to be able to plug into providers like these to actually work with them to say that if let's say we ping them with a profile that's been opened an account, and then they kind of check that, and then they come back and say, no, this is a no-go. That's it. They don't need to give me any more thing apart from saying that this is not right.
Right.
Then, you do not extend the problem of people opening an account and doing further crimes with that fake passport. That's one example.
I see. So clearly, it's all about authenticating the process, the automation process, and when you're talking about Interpol, I just want to raise this point: is that clearly bespeaks of the just potential of partnerships. That's really why the conversation's happening. You can see the value there with that relationship.
Yes, and the second thing is that because the Interpol part is actually also answers who you're not. You know, go back to the four question that I said, because you don't want to be dealing with people who hands you a stolen passport, for example. That's who you are not. Now, on the who you are question, a lot of the governments or a few governments around the world, including the ones in Singapore, has come out with this thing called the EKYC. You know, which is basically a government database to say that you can ping that database potentially and say that you don't need to provide your national ID to prove that you are who you are, which is great. And if that happens, and if they get somewhere with these initiatives, then we will want to be able to plug in and have conversation with them to say that let's authenticate this without having people to keep giving us copies of the IC, because. And in fact, that will actually be much better because you don't actually have to worry about the storage of the copies of these documents. It's an API ping, and then they authenticate and come back with a result to saying this is good or this is not good. So it makes it a lot easier for the entire process and more efficient. But the reality is this is not going to move on day one. It's going to be a continuous iteration in the next, I believe, at least in the next 5 to 10 years globally. Some nations have already started, but I think you can start this process global in one country, but to come to a conclusion that this is completely digitized and completely EKYC is going to take some time.
I see, and obviously in your position, you are well situated to have that first move. Entry point into and that's really the crux of this, is why we're discussing this.
We don't want to wait for it to happen, then we do something, because by then you'll be too late.
Sure. And obviously we're going to explore your tech as well, because that's the fundamental, is that you have the technology to really integrate into these systems and then build upon them to really have a mainstay position for the future. To do that, you would need a great team as well, Chye Kit. So let's discuss that for a moment in the context of both your team and your advisors, both exceptional, particularly your advisors. I want to discuss them. But what sets you apart, or why is your team so good? Your experience is second to none if you amalgamate all the years of experience for this industry. So give them a plug. Why is your team good?
Okay. I think my team is unique in the sense that we're not using technology to say let's use this technology to fix this problem, fix that problem, and we're almost like trying to find a problem with the solution. I don't think that's quite right. It's almost like the cart and the horse analogy. So my team is experienced with my CTO Des Donovan is actually experienced with blockchain. He's one of the earlier person who in Asia, in Singapore, to have dealt with the Bitcoin vending machines that sort of time. So it's 2013 era. So he's got a long experience in that, and he's also got a personal passion on identity as well as privacy. So that actually fits in very well, because a technologist on its own, will just look at technology being, his knowledge of technology being the greatest and second to none. But for my CTO, it's quite different, because he's actually got a separate passion around how to solve the identity problem and how to solve to deal with the privacy problem as well. So that combination is one part of it.
Sure.
Now, another area that we're bringing together, which is actually the artificial intelligence and machine learning aspect of technology, and I think that is real use case in the KYC space to tap into that technology, rather than to say you can use AI on every single thing. You can't. There's some things you can, some things you can't. So in our space, particularly like transaction monitoring, I think there's a lot of use case that we can do. So my other co-founder, Jin Yan, he's actually also run a deep learning, machine learning startup called Shantilium, and basically that helps people or fund houses or trading houses or prop trading houses to try and use machine learning, deep learning techniques to basically trade better.
And has that been successful so far? Has that been successful to date?
They do have a number of clients, because as we've I wouldn't say that, because this is where people misunderstand the use case of machine learning and artificial intelligence.
Sure.
It's where it actually takes a long time to actually fine tune and tweak your algorithm, and you don't just. It's not like something that you can plug in today and then say, hey, it straight away it works wonders. It doesn't work like that, especially when you are dealing with complex algorithm on trading and trying to gather informations together and be able to fine tune that process. And another aspect is that you need a lot of expert validation as well. And so we see this marriage of technology and with some experience on AI and machine learning that Jean brings along with my background. I won't necessarily want to call myself expert, but with my background, I think we do have a better chance than a lot of people out there trying to say, let's just plug AI into this, plug AI into that. We want to plug AI into a specific area that we think that will definitely help the cryptocurrency sector to level up their regulatory standards.
Right.
And not go through all the long and windy roads that potentially the incumbents have gone through.
Right, and Chye Kit, we appreciate that you're essentially saying that you're looking at skill sets of different, people within your team to really build out a holistic, group of people to really enter into a boardroom and say, yes, we have the preparedness for this project down pat. So, is there anyone else you wanted to add into the team to mention specifically?
Yeah, certainly. So our team of advisor. Professor Wee. Professor Wee is the chair professor of National University of Singapore in the School of Computer Studies or Computer Science. So he's got one of the largest lab in NUS, in Asia, for example, and he's actually very, very much into database studies and as well as getting into blockchain and use cases of machine learning and AI. So we see that as at the end of the day, KYC has got something to do with database. All your records and all that, and whether you keep it in a decentralized fashion, IPFS or any other thing, there's a huge potential how we can learn from the traditional centralized database storage techniques, and try and see how else can we do with this. So
not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. He has that experience. He brings to the table, and then can take it from there.
Yeah. So that's one thing. And another advisor that we have, or technical advisor, is Loy Lu.
Yes.
Loy is actually CEO and co-founder of Kyber Network. So and he's actually very, very into the blockchain side.
Can I just interrupt you there for a moment? Loy Lu is famous, for his role. He's an advisor for many projects. So I wanted to just really get frank with you. Is Loy Lu, given that he's the CEO of Kyber, a very prominent and well-respected project in itself, is he going to be a lip service advisor, or is he actually going to be directly involved and actively involved throughout this process?
Oh no, he's not a lip service advisor because we just had barbecue yesterday. So the key thing is that, in fact, the birth of Traceto idea has got something to do with him as well, because he. It came about when because I'm actually we helped Kyber as a synopsis helped Kyber when they did their ICO last September, right? So once that when we're in the process of doing that, there's this conversation about the much needed utility that should be there, and then we started talking about this. So he's actually very, very intimately involved with what we do. Definitely not a lip service advisor.
Sure.
And I don't think he's a lip service person at all.
Right. And we appreciate that. Sure, we appreciate that because we've seen others, and I certainly won't name names, Chye Kit, but we have seen several advisors simply do it by default because they can, because they're invited to do so given their name. And the reason why I ask you is because Loy Lu is so well respected in the space. He is so he's prominently positioned as a CEO of another company. So it's great to see that from your own experience and you're validating his position and that he has clear collaboration intent.
He has, and in fact, the other thing that we do is that because of what I help him with in the KYC space, I'm also sitting on Kyber's advisor board,
right?
And we meet quite regularly to talk about things and to explore areas of mutual collaboration. So it certainly it's not a lip service.
Right. Well, that's exciting to know, and it's also great to hear that you are also trying to support Kyber as well. being that it's a
Yes.
reciprocal arrangement that's quite serious.
Yes.
If you could
Yes.
tell us a bit more now about, and just one point of mention as well, I noticed that you have an executive from Kyber that isn't the CEO, and that's Wong Lee Hong as well, who's
Yes.
also
Yes.
involved as another advisor. That's exciting.
Yes, Lee Hong is well, myself, Lee Hong, and Lloyd, we talk quite a lot. So yes, I see Lee Hong as not a technical advisor, but he's actually a business advisor for us. Because of his vast experience in the banking sector as well. He works in banks before, as well as his connections and his interaction with all the crypto or the blockchain participants. That we see that as a very good opening of doors to our project.
Right.
It's when I mentioned that, so I've sort of mentioned the other advisors that we have as well, if you don't mind.
Of course.
So we've got Simon Kim, who's actually a CEO of Hash, the largest crypto investors in South Korea. Now, in part, Loy and Lee Hong introduced me to Hash last year, and then I was back up in Seoul, had a dinner with Simon, and then the whole idea of the need to have Traceto sort of got us all very excited, and he's been a supporter since day one. And he sits on the advisor board as well, and he's also an early backer.
Yes.
Now, the other advisor we've got is John Ng from Signum Capital.
Yes, that's right.
Now, Signum Capital is one of the very, very prominent upcoming crypto VC in the region, and he's also been very, very helpful in terms of making introductions. You look at the projects that Signum Capital has. He wants to create a portfolio whereby each of these projects can leverage off each other's strengths and be able to work with each other collaboratively, so that the entire portfolio can actually be very successful, rather than one single project being successful amongst his
and it made perfect sense to me when I looked at the connection between your strategic investors and also some of these people who were your advisors.
Yes.
There was a perfect relationship between support for them, and it made sense. But I did want to illuminate those that weren't necessarily your strategic backers, and that's also why I think the Kyber Network stood out to me. I'm glad you clarified their role, because they do have a good reputation in the space. If we could extend this now, you've mentioned some of those partners. We talked about Hash and Signum Capital, but there's others as well that are listed there. Let's talk about those that perhaps people don't know. So Chye Kit, you would know more than anyone else in the world what's in the pipeline for partnerships, both now and in the future.
Okay, the ones that we're constantly talking to a lot of people. Now, the ones that we've put out includes Digix. I've already mentioned. Digix has been a long-term client of Synopsys, and we've actually announced that they will be an early adopter once Trace2 come on board. Kyber Network is another example, and the others will be like Gibraltar Blockchain Exchange, GBX. So GBX is also a client of Synopsys, and once we go live and once they go live, they will want to be able to use Trace to power their KYC process. So that's another one that we have put out. So we see that as a demonstration of a varieties of participants that can actually be part of this network, which is very, very exciting, because Kyber is a DEX, right? So, and GBX is a centralized exchange, and either of these still needs KYC. So we see that as a great example of how varied this could potentially be.
And you're also covering your bases by having those support networks in place.
Exactly, and the other one will be like, for example, one of the largest crypto wallets in South Korea, Coin Manager.
Okay.
So they've been a big supporter of us as well, and potentially, as with the early adopters that we've got and partnership that we've got, they kind of see that, and they most of them are actually very, very aligned in terms of the vision with us, that the regulatory requirement is going to get tougher. You can try and pretend that it's not there for a while, but you better want to be future proving and be future ready, so that when it comes in, you don't have to struggle and put everything down and stop business and deal with it. So people see that, and I think it's is a good alignment of interest. Now then, we've got other people like PolicyPal. PolicyPal has also put out partnership posts with us. And once we're already, it's a very exciting thing for us.
Absolutely, I've spoken to Val actually, and what she's doing in the insurance sector is simply outstanding. That she has backed with her one of the most experienced insurance sort of experts in Singapore.
Yes, sure. I mean, that's one a good example. Now then, there are other providers like Financial X, which is actually a platform to do P2P selling of. It's also related to insurance, transfers of insurance and selling of insurance on a P2P manner. Now. Then the other one that we've announced will be FinTrucks. FinTrucks is a Canadian-based P2P micro-lending platforms.
Right.
I think they're one of the largest here in Canada.
So you're partnering with banking and insurance.
Yeah, it's basically anything, right? Because anyone who needs or who have to do KYC and wants to be part of this blockchain ecosystem. Can come in, and as remember I said I'm promoting regulatory inclusion,
right?
And defining inclusion in a way means that you want to make sure that as many people as included as possible,
right? Because
you don't want to be defining inclusivity and then end up defining exclusivity because only certain people can come in. That would be completely wrong.
And again, it's a perfect segue into the potential of these partnerships as well, Chye, because clearly you're well situated to know what's coming around the corner before we do. So you've mentioned the ones that are already listed, but what about the future, the ones we don't know that you do? Clearly you must be optimistic, and you can't disclose clearly some of the ones that are on the books that are about to be released, but surely, given that you know that it's a requisite for the many different enterprises coming on board, how are you feeling about what?
Okay,
how big your partnership
I can't name names. I'm sorry, Brad. But I can only say that we're talking to quite a lot of. Some of them are existing clients of ours, and some of them are not. So once
are they big companies? Are they big names?
Are they big names? I think it's a combination of small, medium size as well. Because I don't. At the moment, my approach is not to hit, with a very, 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 very huge outfit, and end up potentially swallowing the entire ecosystem and disrupting entirely what I want to do. Because what I want to actually promote, as I keep stressing, is regulatory inclusion for small, medium-sized operations as well as startups. Because we are aligned in the sense that we're in the same situation. We want to help our friends, our startup peers to be able to level up their standards to the point that they can actually compete with incumbents as well. So so I'm not gonna say that we don't talk to the big ones. It's just that we want to talk to the ones that actually will value and appreciate our service rather than to treat us as one of the other service providers.
I see. So you're not going to discriminate. You're not going to simply just look at those who are the bigger players and start with them first.
I don't want to do that. I mean, see, the way we build our business in startups is that if I look at it to say because we sell software as a service, so we earn subscription fees as a revenue. So in my approach is that I'd rather have a 1,000 clients paying me in total a million revenue rather than have one client paying me $1 million revenue, because this is too much concentration risk. It's not good business sense, and it's not diversified enough, and it sort of goes against the concept of decentralization as well.
I think you raise a very important point in the revenue aspect you mentioned, and being an accountant makes perfect sense. Well, if we could now move to your roadmap as well, Chye Kit, because you have clear goals that you want to achieve in this very linear system of the roadmap itself. So let's talk now Q2, Q3, just this year alone. What are the key achievements that you want to
I think by Q3 we should be able to release a light version on the mainnet in terms of what we want to do, because you see, remember, always go back to the 4 questions that I mentioned. It's a huge or I say it's a very holistic way of looking at KYC, and we won't be able to do everything. I'm just being a realist here. We won't be able to do everything tomorrow on day one. I don't think anyone expects that, right? So what we want to do is to be able to launch some fundamentally essential features by Q3, where the team is actually that's headed by Des and Jean. They're working quite hard to make sure that we're able to come up with like an alpha beta version very soon. And by Q3, we probably want to be able to launch a light version on the mainnet.
I see. So that's quite achievable though, and that's quite remarkable given that we're still in a very nascent period of time, and you're achieving these this year. We've actually seen examples of things moving out into 2019, 2020, but you are really making some waves, despite that you are being very careful and considered. If we could now talk about what many people want to talk about, and that is the tokenomics, itself, the ICO. Clearly, you've been on hold for some time. You've previously been in this phase of private sale. Let's go right through it. Tell us everything you know first about the ICO, and then we'll move across into perhaps the token itself in terms of its purpose.
So, sorry, you want me to describe the token distributions?
If you could tell us about the fundamentals of, for example, the dates and the cap itself, and then if you could tell us the distribution and if there's been any changes at all.
Can, no problem. Now, the caps is actually 35,000 Ether.
Right.
This is what we're looking at right now. And the dates, the private sales open. The dates for the we're doing our public round with GBX, and that's another extension of our collaboration.
Sure.
So what that means is that there's going to be two separate rounds for the public. One is early access, and the early access round opens on the 21st of May.
21st of May.
21st of May, and that's actually for existing GBX Rock token holders to have a bit of an early access in that sense, because that's going to be mutually beneficial for ourselves and for GBX as an exchange. Now, then the general public sale will actually be on the 8th of June.
Okay, so the crowd sale is 8th of June.
Crowd sale is 8th of June. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So now, these are some of the dates right now that we've already announced. Now, in terms of the token distributions, what we have is that we are selling the total as the private and the public added together. We're selling 40% of our token base, and that's for 35,000 Ether.
I see.
All right. So that's a sale.
And can I ask you if you happen to know, just roughly ballpark, that kind of value in USD, so people can understand and transfer that value of 35,000 ETH? What would that be worth roughly as a hard cap?
As a hard cap at the moment, it's probably about like 20 plus a little bit.
Roughly.
20,
okay, so 20 mil.
Roughly about that.
Okay.
Because the fluctuation, is quite hard to pinpoint, right? So. And the remaining 60%, so 10% will be for companies reserve. We've actually brought that down from 30% from the previous sets of tokenomics, and we thought that that's probably the right thing to do.
Sure. And in that respect, also, Chye Kit, you did reduce the overall hard cap as well.
Yes, we reduced. Previously, we're looking at 30 million USD as a hard cap.
So you've reduced it by a third, which is a significant consideration given the pretext we have of what essentially was a very difficult market.
Yes, it was a difficult market, and we felt that we were looking at references from similar projects in the past. We felt that was about the right number, and also it was a little bit. To be honest, it was we used USD because we thought that it's probably easier for people to relate to.
Right.
But on the converse, we do get quite a number of feedback saying that we should have pegged in ETH,
right?
Which makes it easier for people who are very used to ETH. So I don't think there's anything wrong or right or wrong in this. But we just decided that let's just reduce it to something that is more palatable. The appetite is there, and then bring it to ETH, and we just get rid of the complication of having to peg to US dollar and Yeah, and that's just
And,
do it, right?
and clearly also, Chye Kit, what you're saying is that you've redressed things based on community feedback, which is really
Yes.
impressive because you're taking the responses of community members quite seriously, particularly in this regard. Now, you've mentioned also with regard to the distribution, you've changed that. You've reduced
Yes.
the allocation for
Yes.
the company themselves quite
Yes.
significantly.
Yes. Yes, I think that's okay. The allocation 30% for company was always meant to be for company to hold, and in situations whereby you need to do you need to spend on future growth and
research,
whatnot,
development,
research and things that is are not expected, So we wanted to keep that, and there was never an intention to enrich the company with this token so that we can go party and stuff like it. Was
well, let's talk about that in the context of vesting periods, because clearly you couldn't anyway if you have a strong vesting period design built in. So do you have one?
Yeah, we do have one. So if I look at my the reserve, the 10% reserve, we have a vest. It's not so much of investing. We'll lock it
for a year.
Yeah, it will be for a year because it's not vested to anybody. We just want to be able to keep it there. It's 10%. It's not a lot. We see projects that's as high as 30-50% as well, but depends on the needs. So then let's just go through all the percentages. So 40%, 10%, so 50%. Now 25% would increase the marketing and the legal side of the distribution, because previously we had 15%. We realized and we felt that we need to potentially do a lot more marketing, whether is it for listing purposes or for future growth and marketing. So we see that area will probably need to budget a little bit more there. So we move from reserve to that part, which is reallocation, and then we then another. That's 25%, and the remaining 25% hasn't changed. It's actually for the founders, the advisors, as well as the team, right? So it's the team will include people that have worked with us, whether is it from the sign-off system or from the Shantillium team or whoever that have actually helped within to make this.
And clearly there'd be a lock up with that as well, you would imagine.
Yes, that will be a lockout over a 2-year period.
Okay, so that's even longer at 2 years. So people can rest assured that these advisors and these team members aren't simply going to capitalize at the point of release on exchanges. So you've made this very clear, and thank you for also explaining those changes and what you've done to redress your metrics. If we could now talk about the access point as well with regard to the ICO, Chye Kit, because there are approximately 19 countries that can't access your ICO. Can the US? Is what I wanted to ask you.
Because we are doing the IO with GBX, so I don't determine what country gets accepted or what country gets rejected. Right. So they have obvious, and this is not done frivolously by GBX as well, because they have gone through a very, very detailed and comprehensive legal jurisdiction by jurisdiction analysis, which is why they are a responsible exchange to say who they want to be able, who will be able to access and who will not be able to access. So I didn't really count, but a large number of these locations are mapped to countries that are potentially on the sanction list, like the United Nations sanction list, for example.
Like Iran, Iraq, Korea, several.
And with due respect, we're not saying that people coming from those locations are bad. It is just that for the service provider like the exchange to deal with anybody coming from those countries potentially increases. It's a business at the end of the day, right? Potentially increases operational costs, potentially increases the need to do more work, in order to accept that customer. So this is all about due diligence, how much you want to do, vis-a-vis how much you want to get out of that account.
I see. So you're playing it safe.
Yes, it's not so much of me, but the point is that GBX would have taken the approach and their right legal regulatory advice. Which country is good, which country is bad. Oh, sorry, I wouldn't say good or bad. Which country is acceptable, which country they do not want to take the risk.
Absolutely.
Now, then another example is that, for example, South Korea, for example, that's one location that has always been one of the it's a great market there. People are very very into crypto, but with the regulatory changes fluctuating here and there, there's also a lot of projects that may have gotten a little bit nervous about South Korea, whether they can accept Korean monies or not. So for the record, this is acceptable with us, which means that South Koreans can actually open an account with GBX and participate in the crowd sale.
I see. Well, you made it really clear that through GBX there is this mechanism for them to determine essentially the access points. Yes, of course. And but once again,
they are. For that, there's a regulatory legal basis for them to make that determination, not in a frivolous manner, just because I don't like this country, I don't want it.
Right, and it's important to also know they are separate from you, and that they dictate that themselves. If we could now explore the challenging question of competition, or I suppose potential collaboration and synergistic positions as well with companies such as Sovereign, Civic, Uport, as they've been mentioned. If we could just explore this one bit further, what's your position on this concept of competitor? And really, once again, if you could explain, in a nutshell, what would be the one distinguishing feature that really sets you apart from them, if you had to, really argue the point.
Yeah. I think I've already mentioned that earlier on in terms of the one distinguished factor that sets us apart is the way we look at this problem of KYC, which we look at it holistically, more holistically than a lot of the providers out there, not just the ones that you mentioned, because we're facing competitions from all over the world and from all sorts of providers. Like you've named a few that are saying that they are building their solutions on the chain. We're facing competitions from the real world providers like the incumbents, database companies, for example.
Right.
I won't name the names, but database companies, as well as the RegTech companies who say that they can crawl the web for all the sanctions, adverse media, and PEPs of the world, and I've got a much better database than anybody else in the world. So if we face competition like this, but at the end of the day, we are solving the broader KYC problem. We've got to plan how to do that.
Right.
A lot of these players, whether you're identity management or whether you're just using technology to say, let's validate this passport, and this is what they do. Let's focus on facial recognition, and this is what they do in one siloed fashion. But they do not have a framework to fit the technology that they have or the solution that they have into the grand scheme of how to solve the same problem, or how to solve this KYC problem.
So you make the point that you are a framework fundamentally, and you are robust by design. Well, if we could explore from there, the incentivization mechanism as well. Clearly, there needs to be a reward system built in for people to be incentivized to use this. Have you considered that in your design?
Yes. So one incentivization is, it's a little bit implicit. It's through the promotion of regulatory inclusion, because of the ecosystem, the early adopter network that we've built and we're continuously building. That itself is an incentivization for other exchanges or other wallets, or platforms to come in, because that means that they are leveling up and benchmarking to a standard that a lot of people are using, right? So that's definitely is a slightly more intrinsic incentivization, because you want to be on the right side of the fence rather than be on the wrong side of the fence.
Sure.
Now, on the tokenomics itself, obviously, in terms of the use case or utility portion of it. Now, taking one step back is that end users themselves, generally are not going to be the one who wants to pay for KYC, right? Because they are consumer of services.
Right.
They are KYC'd because they want to acquire a service from the exchange. For example, they want to be able to transact. They want to be able to do this. They want to be able to do that. So we see that as one fundamental premise. Now, with that in mind, we want to be able to incentivize the community in a different way. We want to incentivize the community to use community to perform some kind of a verification task or basic verification task for the ecosystem and get rewarded for it.
Right.
Right, so the community could be, like say, for example, compliance officers or professional service providers on their own, and they kind of want to be able to do something, outside of their regular work hours. They say that, okay, I've got the experience, I've got the expertise, potentially I can actually perform some work for you.
Well, that's where that's where the
basic
T2T token comes in. It's specifically
Yes.
designed as that utility.
Yes, yes, and as well as the fact that if someone is performing that verification task for us, then there will be a staking requirement. So they need to put up some T2T as a stake to make sure that we incentivize good behavior within these verifiers, because you don't want people to just randomly do stuff for us and not be responsible for it.
Right.
So that's an incentivization mechanism.
So clearly the clients inject revenue into it via actualizing and utilizing your service, and the user then benefits from that injection of
Correct.
support.
Correct. And then benefits from it by also, we just mentioned it earlier on, that you do not have to be KYC'd multiple times.
Yeah, right.
But that doesn't mean that you only do it one time, because remember the third question, are you still who you say you are? Because KYC have to be continuous and it has to be ongoing. So, at the end of the day, when we check, let's say, a profile up and we issue, say, for example, a reputation score to that profile,
right.
That scores decays if you decides to not do anything with that validated profile for, say, I don't know, 6 months, 3 months, whatever, and then it needs to be kept current.
Right.
So we are considering we haven't been put it out yet, but we're considering a way whereby how can we incentivize and think about it in a converse way, that to say, how can I incentivize the end user themselves to pay for keeping their profiles current,
right,
valid, because they have to be incentivized to that. But it's always a tricky thing, right?
Absolutely, and it's great that you're thinking of some of these innovative potentials for this industry, because really no one else is thinking in this way.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know what other people are thinking, but we think that in order to run a real
and to sustain, really that's what we're talking about.
Right, you need to be thinking 2, 3, 4 steps ahead of what other people are doing. So even our social verification concept is quite unheard of. If you look at the actual traditional business, what they're doing is just ticking the boxes, and going through what the rule says. And they haven't considered whether, what happens about social reputation.
Yes.
If you are, you may not be a bad person, or you may not be a sanctioned person, but you have got a extremely, extremely bad reputation on the web, then, certainly that should account for some aspect of KYC,
and what's exciting also, what you're really making clear is that you have a strong foresight in valorizing a person's identity. They're valorizing from their own position, so they understand that it has monetary value potentially, and that they need to ensure that they can uphold that and support that for their own interests. So that's an interesting concept we haven't heard of before. Now, clearly, as part of this, there are no doubt potentials for cross-chain application as well, Chye Kit, in that you now currently are utilizing ERC20 through the Ethereum network, but you have visions beyond that, no doubt.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So this is one thing that I'm not a technical person, but this is one thing that I have stressed to my team, that at the end of the day, KYC utility have to be cross-chain, whatever you call it, right? So although at the moment we're building on Ethereum, and then by far I think we can probably safely say that it's one of the most functional one available today, and obviously the Ethereum Foundation are working on various projects to make it more scalable and more for greater adoption, with so many projects coming onto this chain. It's gonna be heavy, right? So they're working on ways to how to do the scalability of that. So that is what I call it inherent, meaning that it's not within my control. Now, as a utility, I have to be chain agnostic, if there's such a term, and as well as I could potentially be thinking a bit broader, that like some of the names that you mentioned, if they're playing in the identity space only, and they're very, very good, there's no reason why that cannot be plugged into our ecosystem and say that that plays part of the role. It's a question of whether they want to collaborate.
Sure, absolutely. Well, you've covered so much today. I mean, we've learned, as you mentioned before, fundamentally you're a platform. You know, the Trace2.io is far beyond simply just one aspect, as you mentioned, a management tool. It's not. It's really looking at KYC holistically and moving into utilizing AI, and fundamentally it's supporting that concept of RegTech and compliance. So on behalf of all who've wanted to know your position, particularly in this KYC space, thank you very much for your time. Is there anything you wanted to add as well, Chye Kit, with regard to just your overall position in the space, if you wanted to address perhaps the community?
I think we are definitely in a I would call it the brave new world of cryptocurrency, and it's going to continuously evolve. I don't think anyone can actually shut down this ecosystem or this sector,
right.
And what we're doing at Traceto is actually to position the cryptocurrency community for the future by making sure that we operate at a level that regulatorily is acceptable by law enforcer and by the regulators around the world. So that itself is very exciting, because with only doing that, then you are able to actually say that you're going to be able to build a responsible, sustainable ecosystem and service for the community. Otherwise everybody is just going to be doing this for 1 year, 2 years, and then they're out of the game. And I think it's definitely not what we want to see for the future.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much for explaining everything. You are clearly a very cohesive one-stop shop for compliance of the future in a decentralized space. So, Chye Kit, you are the co-founder and the CEO of Trace2.io. That is certainly also the website, guys, and there's other social media channels you can go to if you would like to explore this. But on behalf of us all, once again, thank you very much for your time, and we look forward to following you as you evolve into what will certainly be a very exciting project, company, and blockchain proponent for the future.
Thank you, Brad.
No problem. Thank you.
Bye-bye.